Underworld Amusements presents The Occult Technology of Power, the initiation of the son of a finance capitalist into the arcane secrets of economic and political power. Edited by Kevin I. Slaughter. Read by Michael Anthony Mitchell. The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Benjamin Disraeli, Earl of Beaconsfield. To my son. In this thin volume, you will find the transcripts of your initiation into the secrets of my empire. Read them again, not for the arcane knowledge which is now second nature you, but in order to re-experience the shock and awe you felt 20 years ago, when, at age 30, the fabulous scope of my power was revealed to you by my trusted, and now mostly departed, advisors. Remember the surprise, to the point of disbelief, with which you beheld the invisibly delicate but invincible chains of deceit, confusion, and coercion with which we finance capitalists enslave this chaotic world. Remember the feats of will and strategy that have been required to retain our position. Then inspect your retinue carefully. Your heir must be equal to and eager for the task much as you were. Choose him carefully. As I lie here waiting for the end, I can afford to relish the thought our empire lasting forever as I never dared while in charge. Rational power calculations, so easily disrupted by the thrill of power, are now entirely in your hands. Know, will, dare, and be silent. Aleister Crowley. The transcripts. Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, a rope over an abyss. I teach you the Superman. Man is something to be surpassed. Friedrich Nietzsche. Self-reverence, self-knowledge, self-control, these three alone lead to sovereign power. Alfred Lord Tennyson. And nothing, not God, is greater to one than oneself is. Walt Whitman. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Aleister Crowley, The Book of the Law. My introduction to your initiation. My son, the time has arrived to make formal what you have confidently awaited for some years. Of all your brothers, sisters, and cousins, as well as the offspring of my close allies, I have chosen you to be heir to my empire. All the trust funds, foundations, and accounts through which my empire is controlled shall pass into your hands upon my retirement. All my alliances, understandings, and enmities with my handful of peers around the globe shall gradually become yours. Over the next 20 years, we shall collaborate closer and closer, you and I, until we finally act as one. For 10 years, you have toured my empire in a succession of managerial assignments and are now familiar with the outward operations of my crucial banking, foundation, governmental, and think tank organizations. Until now, my advisors and I have deflected your questions as to how and if my diverse operations and holdings, which seem autonomous and even contradictory, are integrated into an organic whole to serve the dynasty's interests. The fact that you asked these questions, rejecting my carefully nurtured public image as an idle, coupon-clipping philanthropist, was a major factor in the high esteem in which I hold you. Most of your competitors found puppet leadership in any one of my organizations so awesome and gratifying that they immediately eliminated themselves from the contest for the top position which you have won. Such men of limited vision are necessary for my success. They bend unconsciously to the subtle pressures to which I expose them. They can be led in any direction I choose by simple-minded rationalizations aimed at their vanity without being privy to my motives, which would be short-lived secrets in their undisciplined and envious minds. Most important in your selection as my successor, however, was your psychological nature, which has been faithfully reported to me over the years by my associates, many of whom have advanced psychological training. A man in my position must have total mastery over his emotions. All actions affecting the power of the dynasty must be taken on the basis of coldly reasoned power calculations if the dynasty is to survive and prosper at the expense of its subjects and rivals. All power is impossible to those whose pursuit is ruled by sentimentality, love, envy, power lust, revenge, prejudice, hatred, justice, alcohol, drugs, or sexual desire. Sustained power is impossible to those who repress all their irrational longings into their subconscious, only to have them return in compulsive, out-of-control behavior that inevitably leads to their ruin. Although often clothed in the rationalizations of power calculation, compulsive behavior is, at root, the emotionalism of a frightened child, desperately projecting his inner agony into a reality he is afraid to understand, much less master. Although you now must begin to pursue it consciously, you have already displayed the alienation from your emotional nature that is so essential to achieving real worldly power. You must recognize your emotional nature as a primitive survival mechanism that was appropriate for the jungle and perhaps useful to common men, but useless for the tasks that confront us finance capitalists. Attachment to what you do, just because you do it, is the primary psychological characteristic of ordinary mortals. Such cognitive dissonance spells disaster for us. Our emotional mechanism makes our lives worth living, but is no guide to the occult arts of intrigue. So, continue to gratify your senses and emotions fully at your leisure. As long as the empire prospers, you will have the resources to indulge in systematic gratification, which will leave your irrational urges sated and, therefore, powerless. You will never be in the unenviable position of the middle-class strivers who must, from lack of resources, repress their emotional natures if they are to attain any power whatever during their lives. Typically, they end up taking their pleasure from the victories and cruelties of their struggle. Thus, their end ceases to be power, and they eventually defeat themselves with reckless behavior in pursuit of dominant thrills. I have brought you into seclusion with my most trusted advisors in order to inaugurate a new phase of your instruction. Your formal training in the official political economic world is now complete. This weekend will mark the beginning of your training in the occult technology of power that lurks behind outer appearances. As your tutors will explain, occult, or secret knowledge, is the basis of all power in human society, so I use the word occult advisedly in its pristine usage. As I am sure you are aware by now, productivity in itself does not secure power, and therefore does not secure the gratifications of life. After all, slaves can be productive. None of my organizations in which you served so well are concerned with advancing the techniques of satisfying human needs and desires. Rather, all are dedicated to the surreptitious centralization of productive, but especially coercive, efforts in my hands, or in creating the intellectual climate in which such veiled control would be tolerated in the future. I destroy or paralyze productive efforts that cannot be ensnarled in my web. After a break, Professor A will take the floor in order to put finance capitalism into full biological perspective. His short talk will be followed by similar abbreviated summaries by his 6 associates, all of whom you know well. The rest of the weekend will be devoted to forthright fielding of your questions.